everybody, this is Hammer Striker here. Today we're getting a visit from the Governor, the Smith & Wesson Governor that is. This is a 6-round revolver that's chambered in a list of calibers actually. 410 shot shells, 45 Long Colt, and 45 ACP. The 45 ACP is accomplished with these little moon clips. It comes with 2 6-round ones, and then it comes with these 3 of the 2-rounders. You might think, well, why would I want to bother with the 2-rounders? Well, it lets you do a mix. We've got some video footage where we did 410, 45 Long Colt, and 45 ACP in the same wheel. So with this, you can set it up with either combination of defense, FMJ, or just split up the mix of calibers that you want to shoot at any given time. So let me pick this thing up and talk about it a little bit. First, we'll start out that it is unloaded. You got your 6 very long chambers. And the unique characteristic of this revolver is that you do have the ability to chamber any combination at any given time of those 3 calibers. And 410 and 45 Long Colt can be a little expensive. 45 ACP is reasonably inexpensive. So you can load the others when you need the more power, but have the 45 ACP for fun at the range. From an ergonomic standpoint, it's got this rubber overmold grip that completely covers everything your hand touches as rubber. And it's actually really comfortable. It's got little finger grooves in here, some stippling pattern. It's got a smooth back strap, but it is rubber so that you're not holding any metal at any point. The frame is made from scandium, so it's a very light revolver. The wheel and the barrel are both stainless steel, and the cylinder is PVD coated, so it matches. And they've done a pretty good job of color matching the two. There's a little bit of a sheen difference, but when you're looking at it in person, the color lines up really nicely. And then you've got a stainless steel barrel insert with a crown. So it's a very nice looking revolver. It is available in a couple variations. There's an all stainless version of this, and then there's a version of this that comes with a Crimson Trace laser built in. And they range anywhere from the 900-ish territory to 1100-ish, depending on which flavor you get from an MSRP standpoint. They're not really common, so they don't tend to be discounted as heavily as some others, but you can get some deals on them depending on where you're looking. From a controls perspective, it is a revolver, so it's pretty simple. You've got the release to release the cylinder. You've got the trigger, and it does have a hammer spur with serration and texture on it. So it's very easy to get a hold of this hammer to pull it back, but it is a DASA, so you can choose to pull it back or not. And like any standard revolver, it does have, you can't open the cylinder, of course, when it's cocked. It does have an ejector, and this will eject whichever style shell you've got in there, whether it's moon clips or not. And if you look closely, you'll see this bit of a ridge. And this recess is what allows it to take moon clips. So when you put a moon clip in there that's loaded, it will sit down in there and it'll sit flush. Of course, it won't spin around. It would line up nicely with the cylinders, but it sits flush. You see right there. So that you can use moon clips reliably with this gun. There's another, the competitor to this would be the Taurus Judge, and that has a few limitations. It won't do 45 ACP, and it supports 5 rounds. There is a company, I believe, that makes moon clips that try to fit it, but they don't work reliably. They have a tendency to stick and jam. On this, it has worked flawlessly. It didn't matter what we were using, load those moon clips up, unless one gets bent, it just worked perfectly. So as we cycled through the different ammos, we had no trouble with it. The only issue we did have, and you'll have that with any of these mixed length type guns, is if we were shooting the shorter rounds like 45 ACP, and then went to do 45 Long Colt or 410, they'd stick a little bit going in because the 45 ACP comes maybe to about here and dirties up this section. And then you're trying to put a Long Colt in, which may come to about here, and you're trying to push a case into a dirty section. It doesn't create a safety issue as long as it goes all the way in, but it does create a bit of a function issue. Bring a brush with it, brush it out, or just shoot your longer ammo first, depending on what it is you're out to do that day. From a sights perspective, it actually has pretty nice sights. The front sight is a ringed night sight, so it's a tritium night sight. I'll tilt it up a little bit so you can just see the front sight. And then it fits into a gutter with a nice defined notch. So unlike some gutters that are just kind of a vague hump there, This has actually got a nice defined notch. There's no coloration on the back of it, but we didn't really have any problem seeing this at the range, acquiring our sights, and actually you can pull pretty tight groups with this thing. There was a little variation from ammo type to ammo type where it printed, but not significant enough to make a difference. And of course with the 410 you've got kind of the shot shell effects. You're going to get a little bit bigger impact pattern. And I almost forgot to mention that the front sight is dovetailed. So you could press the front sight out and replace it with a different sight if you wanted. Of course the back sight is what it is. And it's also got a matte finish at the top, which is going to kind of cut down on glare. One thing I also didn't mention when I had it apart is that the ejector rod has got a nice knurl on it to get a hold of it. And it pushes very, very smoothly. So as I push it to operate the ejector, it's very, very smooth. And we didn't have any problem with this ejector skipping any rounds. It caught the rim and ejected reliably every time and very smoothly. Even when they started to stick, just from the getting dirty and the different shell lengths, give it a little pop and it reliably ejected and didn't skip over any of them. The dimensions of this, it's 8.5 inches from end to end, from back here to the front. It's 5.5 inches tall, and it is thick. It's 1.75 inches thick. And that's typical of a revolver. Revolvers tend to be thicker because you have, instead of having the rounds stacked up in the grip, you've got them up at the top in a circle pattern. And of course you've got a little bit larger cylinders because of the rounds that this thing will operate. Operating it was actually very smooth. The trigger on double action mode is very smooth. It's reasonably short. It's a noticeable pull length because you're actually cocking the hammer and then firing the gun. But compared to many of them, it seems to be reasonably short. It is heavy. It pegs out our meter, and our meter goes at 12 pounds. But that's measuring with a device. When I measure it with my finger, it really doesn't feel that heavy because it's so smooth. It's a very, very, very smooth double action pull. When you go into single action mode, of course it's going to be very short because the cocking of the hammer is taking place. It comes up at about 4 pounds 14 ounces, but it doesn't feel like that because it's that short. With a little bit of over travel, but it's almost an imperceptible movement. I'll do it again and I'll try to avoid doing any over travel. That's it. That's the entire trigger pull in single action mode. So though it comes in weighing close to a Glock or any of the others, because you're not doing that weight over any amount of distance, it really feels lighter than it is. Definitely doesn't feel like a hair trigger, and it was easy to control the trigger on the range when we used in single action mode. But it's really smooth, really crisp, and really light. A few of the other things that you'll find about this revolver is locks up here. So here's the locking to lock the cylinder in place. Unlike the Rugers, they have the multi-point lockup. This one doesn't actually have the multi-point lockup. The back, you got your firing pin, and then the hand is in here to advance the cylinder. And then a nice robust forcing cone. Now this forcing cone has to deal with single bullets, 45 Long Colt and 45 ACP, and it also has to deal with shot type shells. So it's designed to make sure that it can properly line up and force even a shot type shell that's going through from the 410s. And we had no problems with it firing any ammo that we put through it. And it gripped pretty tightly no matter what we had. Now from a barrel perspective, one of the things, if I can, I'll do it this way and I'm going to do it the other way, but you see the rifling starts almost right at the end of the forcing cone. So there's plenty of rifling. And unlike some other guns that we have tried, like the Bond Arms, which has only maybe a ½ inch of rifling, if that, maybe even a ¼ inch at one end, this is rifled all the way down the barrel. I'll turn it around. If I can get it to focus, there it goes. And you'll see it's rifled all the way to the end. The significance of that is when you're firing shot, the rifling becomes unimportant. But when you're firing the 45 ACP and the 45 Long Colt, the rifling is important for stabilization. And what I found with like the Bond Arms, it didn't shoot 45 Long Colt or 45 ACP reliably as far as stabilizing the bullet and being able to pull nice groups. So that was a belly gun. This thing, we were shooting it at about 15 yards and pulling nice tight groups with it, groups like any other gun that we've got. And that kind of separates the difference between this and some of the others, where this is designed to actually be accurate at range while being able to shoot the diversity of calibers. Now, 410 itself, there is a bit of controversy on the effectiveness of that. Some people say it's just a fun round, it's a joke, it's not good for self-defense, and other people say it's all you need. I'm somewhere in between. One thing I'll tell you about 410, if I had to list off 100 billion things to do on a Saturday afternoon, taking a 410 round wouldn't even be in the next 100 billion runners-up. I don't want to be in the way of one, and if you're dealing with like a carjacking incident or something like that, looking down that muzzle and having some 410 come your way is probably going to make you realize you got an appointment on the other side of town. Also for critter control, if you've got rabid animals or smaller dangerous animals, I wouldn't go after a bear with this, but smaller dangerous animals, the 410, snakes even, will give you a little bit of spread to deal with that. And with the ability to stack more than one type of ammo in here, you could have 2 410s to get party started, and then 4 45 ACPs or 45 Long Colts, to kind of wrap the party up. So it does give you that diversity. Disadvantage, it's a little bit bulky. It's reasonably light, actually, for the size of it. It's 29.6 ounces, and a lot of that's because the frame is scandium. It's not as heavy as it looks. Now, you're looking at this thing, you're sitting in my hand, you're thinking, that thing is just huge, it's massive. What would I do with anything that big? Well, surprisingly, it's not as big as you might think. I've got this Colt. This is a 45 ACP, government model 1911. And when I put the two side by side, actually I'll put the 1911 at the front. When I put the two side by side and line up the front, line up the barrels, they're about the same size. And I'm going to flip it around the other way so you can see the comparison of the beaver tail. But there's a little bit of hump at the back of the revolver that kind of comes down here and lines up with the beaver tail. So let me flip them over. Line them up. And you'll see that just a little bit of the beaver tail sticks out on the 1911. So from a size perspective, dimensionally, at least height and width or height and length, it's about the same footprint as a 1911. Now, width perspective, I can almost get 2 1911s in there for the width of the thing because of the cylinder. But again, it's not as huge and overly massive as it looks, and it's not as heavy as it looks. And one thing I did notice, unlike some of the other big frame revolvers like this, it's actually pretty well balanced. It's comfortable to hold. This is considered a Z frame. It's basically a stretched end frame. So that gives you a little bit of designation of what they call it. It's got 2 safety features. One, of course, the heavier trigger might be considered a safety feature, but it's got the Smith & Wesson lock right here. With a little key that comes with it, you can turn it and lock the gun out so that it can't be operated. Not all states recognize that as a proper child lock, so you may still need to do a regular lock through the frame. And then the other thing it has, it's got a hammer block. So if I cock the hammer, this may be a little hard to see. See that silver plate down there? When I pull on the trigger, it will hold that plate down. But if I were to pull the trigger and then allow the hammer to come forward, that plate will come up and protrude. And unlike a transfer bar that actually gets up in the way and has the hammer hits the transfer bar, which then hits the firing pin, instead this thing hits a notch on the hammer. So when the hammer comes down, it hits it and it can't reach the firing pin. But either way, what that allows you to do is carry this hammer down on a live round. And if you drop it on the hammer spur, it's not going to go off. Overall, we did find this to be a fun gun. It's kind of an interesting gun. It's actually a lot of fun to shoot. It's fairly easy to shoot well. The size of it makes it very controllable. It may not be the best concealed carry, just from the thickness of it, trying to hide that large grip and the thickness of it. But a nightstand gun, a truck gun, a carjacker repellent, it's got a lot of potential in that range, and the ability to load it with something light to just kind of deter them. And then if they don't get the hint, pull the trigger again, moving to something a little bit bigger. You can start with birdshot, work your way up to buckshot, to slug, to 45, and escalate as needed. It gives you a lot of flexibility. So if you're looking for something along these lines, check out the Smith & Wesson Governor. If you like our videos, please give us a thumbs up, share, subscribe. Don't forget to check us out on Facebook, and have a great day. Thank you.